Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us today. 2 hours. We broadcast from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Jason is engineering the broadcast at GCN in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. Dr. Richard Allen Miller is with us. Welcome, Rick.
Good morning.
Good morning, Rick. Hey, Rick, I was thinking about this today. I believe that you told me many, many, many years ago, like 6, that when someone has the name Richard, the first name Richard, the nickname would be Rick. Unless they work for the CIA, then it's Dick. Is that correct?
No. I said engineers go by Dick and physicists go by Rick. Just the difference in having to wear a tie to work or not. I never had to wear a tie.
So, Rick,
I got to wear tennis shoes and my sweatshirts.
Uh-huh.
And I never went to work. I climbed into my laboratory.
Mm-hmm.
It's a visual.
Rick, I've got yeah. Before we get into physics, I want to mention this. I got a renewal notice from Missouri Farm Bureau. And this will apply probably to a lot of people. Here's what's happening. Membership, organizations that have memberships are pulling these stunts. So on this Missouri, this real busy piece of paper, it says I've got exclusive offers on Fords and Case International Tractors and Sears and Carhartt and Caterpillar Machines and John Deere, and the list goes on and on. It's a real busy piece of paper. It's just 8.5 by 11. And then printed in this white box, it says, Vincent Finelli with our address on it and our membership number, our invoice number, our PIN number, the invoice date, the payment date. And then off in this white box, it says membership dues $30. Then it says number 1, right under there, Missouri MFB, as in Missouri Farm Bureau, Farm Pack, plus $5. Then below that says number 2, MFB, Missouri Farm Bureau Foundation, plus $5. So it's 30, then there's a plus 5, another plus 5, and then total. Says total $40. And then there's a box that has a fine line around it. It says amount enclosed underneath it. So it looks like, if you just look at it quickly, it looks like the total's $40. But if you're not paying attention, you realize that if you're not paying attention, you've just contributed to the Missouri Farm Bureau PAC Political Action Committee and their foundation to spend their money any way they want. So, uncharacteristically like me, I saw this and I was livid because I'm thinking people are being duped into giving them another $10. So I crossed off the Missouri Farm Bureau with black pen. I crossed off the PAC, and I crossed off the foundation, $5 and $5, and I wrote, go to hell. And that's not like me, but I'm pretty angry lately at these stunts that organizations are pulling, trying to be sneaky. I hate it. Have you seen anything like that in your world, Rick, where you've seen sneaky, deceptive behavior?
Oh, sure. All the time. I get ads that my website is about to be closed down because I haven't renewed my da-da-da-da-da. Now, is that a real thing or is that a bad thing? And yes, sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. And I have to go to friends that, oh, that's spam, or no, that's really real. For example, my Northwest Botanical got moved to a different site, and so now what's happening is that some sites don't recognize my email name, and so I'm unallowed to communicate to people I've had no problem communicating to. Joey was one person that I don't know if Joey or Linda from Lexington, but they both, I think, had to go out and change their email so I could communicate. It's never ending, every day, and you don't know friend or foe. You don't know whether to open something. Here's an open invoice with Richard Miller, and I looked at it from Aloha Medicinals, but it's Aloha Medicinals.com, not .com. And so I called the woman up yesterday. No, I didn't send that. What they do is they have something that's very, very similar, but you don't look carefully. And when you don't look carefully, and then there's DHL and UPS and PayPal has a spoof at PayPal.com. And now PayPal's no longer answering me, even though I've never had a problem with PayPal. I am getting weird notices from them that I need to update my credit card. I need to do this. I need to do that. Do I need to do that? I don't know. And that's me. That's been on computers since the 70s.
Okay. Another story. I bought three frost-proof hydrants. And in order to install them, we got our backhoe and we trenched up a lot. I mean, tons and tons and tons. A couple 100 feet of trench, 3 feet deep. We laid the pipe in the water pipe in the bottom of the trench so it wouldn't freeze. Hooked up these hydrants, and we now have we had a leak. And it was really bad because it was leaking at a time when it was so cold out that the leak was flowing water on our driveway. And it was really slippery. It was like a sheet of ice. And because we had the leak, we had to shut off that particular section of plumbing, which shut off watering for the cows. So the cows, the stream's frozen, everything's frozen. And the cows have this cattle waterer that holds 330 gallons, and they can drink out of it, and it doesn't freeze. Well, we had to shut that off because of this cheap frost-free hydrants that's on the same plumbing system. Well, I finally called the manufacturer, and I said, I can't get parts for it. You can't get them anywhere. You have to get them right from the manufacturer. Well, this thing is unidentified. You can't tell where it's from. Ultimately, I determined it's from China. And it's substandard, and the parts are smaller. So the U.S. spare parts don't fit. So I got him to send me a part, and I was kind of frosted that you can't buy parts except from this factory, and you have to find out who the factory is because there's no label on it that says Merrill, Merrill. There's no identification whatsoever. So I finally got that fixed. But in the process of getting it fixed, I called the company that sold it to me, Missouri Farmers Association, MFA. Ultimately, I got transferred to the legal department because I couldn't get to the president. And the gal who answered the phone asked, if I had a message for the number two guy, who's the lawyer. The number two guy is the lawyer for this farmers cooperative. Can you imagine a lawyer being the number two guy right under the president? Well, that's how it works. They must have a lot of problems to have a lawyer as number two. Well, I immediately got a call back from this lawyer who was not in the office. And he threatened me, and he told me if I called one more time, he was going to file a police report for harassment.
Say, what was that number? And I'll call you right now. I dare you. Double dare him. Double dare him. Double dare him.
Okay. Well, their number is 417-462-3266.
Yeah,
and that's Missouri Farm Bureau. Well, here's the problem. So he told me that if I call back, my message left for the president was I was so frustrated, I figured I had to run for the board of directors for this company. So the lawyer calls. That was my message. I can't find nowhere on the internet, what the bylaws are so I can figure out how the board of directors is elected. That's what I want to know. So the message for the CEO was, here's my number. Call me back, please. and I'd like to talk about the board of directors and how how the board of directors is selected. And the lawyer tells me if I call back, he is going to file a police report for harassment. So here you buy a product.
You record it, and you have a witness, and then you double dare them to press charges, because now it becomes a business.
Well, it is business, and what they're doing is they're preventing the open election for the board of directors for a cooperative of which I'm a member. So there's one other point here, that when you're a member of a cooperative and they say, well, you're the owner, you all you members are owners. That's a lie. You just try to get somewhere. Just try to ask, okay, since I'm an owner of the corporation, the not-for-profit corporation, how much are we paying our CEO? Oh, I can't tell you. How much are you paying the vice presidents? We're not going to tell you. Well, wait a minute. I thought I was an owner. Well, we're not going to tell you. You don't have a right to that information. As an owner of a corporation, you don't have a right to know what the salaries are and the bonuses are and the executive compensation and the cars and all these other perks. You don't have a right to know? No. That's the way it works. So what I'm saying is, I believe, my opinion is, these not-for-profit organizations where you are a member and you're told you're an owner as a member, you don't have much clout. You have no clout. Except, you can buy things. You can spend your money there. That's how much clout you have. All right, next item. So we bought this front-end loader attachment. It's 49 inches wide. It is made by a company or sold by a company called Titan, Titan Attachments. And it weighs 122 pounds. The overall width is 51 inches. It has a spear on the front. So what you do is you put this frame, and ours is painted green because it matches John Deere. They painted green, John Deere green. And it has this red spear that's, 49 inches long. And it's a spear, and it's a hardened spear. And that comes out of the top of this frame. And then there's two stabilizing spears, like 18 inches long, that come out of the bottom. Okay. When you get it, it comes in two boxes. One is the frame, and then the other box is the spears, because it's so heavy. And what you do is you thread in the big spear, and you tighten this nut with a pipe wrench, because it's a real big nut, and that secures the main spear. And the smaller spears, the stabilizer spears, are on the bottom. They're about 18 inches long. And you lock them in with a locking bolt. The problem is there's a groove in the bottom spears, and it doesn't line up with the bolts. So when you tighten it in and you pull the spear out from the bale of hay to withdraw from it, the spears stay in the hay. I'll tell you more when we come back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller is with us, richardallenmiller.com. That's richardalanmiller.com. We've got a caller on hold. Please stand by for just a couple of minutes when I finish this up. So we have this Titan brand. It's called a Global Euro style hay spear attachment that fits a John Deere to pick up and move bales, fits on the front end loader. The problem is the lower spears are not secured properly. They have this groove in them that gets locked down by the locking bolt, but the bolt and the groove don't line up. So there's very little security in keeping this spear, these lower spears, from falling out inside the bales of hay. So I called the manufacturer, and they wanted to know that our phone number so they could check and make sure we actually bought it. And they said, yeah. I said, so are other people calling with the same problem? Oh, yes. And so theirs are coming out too? Yeah. So what are they doing? Well, some people are welding them in. Well, if you have to bring this 120-something pound, 122-pound attachment that is 51 inches wide by 49 inches tall, it's not going to fit in your trunk. You're going to have to put it in a pickup truck, if you have to have somebody weld it. They're going to charge you $50 to weld it. Why would you have to pay $50 or more, and then you have to paint it so it doesn't rust? Why would you want to do that when you just bought this darn thing and it's supposed to be right from the factory? Well, it's not. Why? Because quality control on these Chinese products is lousy. And the U.S. importers, the people who sell them, don't seem to check them. So we're not the only ones that have this problem. And I know we're not the only ones that have the problem with the frost-free hydrants. that are made in China. But nowhere does it say make in China on either of these products. It does not say. So our government corporations not protecting us from these unscrupulous companies, corporations who are selling us products that are either defective or substandard. They are not. So what do? This is USA Prepares. I'm going to tell you what you do. You call up the manufacturer. And you say, well, how long is this thing supposed to last? 10 years. Well, it failed in 3. Okay, well, we can sell you the parts. What? Sell me the parts? It's supposed to last 10 years. Well, if you insist, we'll send them to you. How many do you need? I need 2. Okay? That's what you do. So we got the parts for the frost-free hydrant. And then, of course, we have to put them in. And if I wasn't smart enough, I'd have to hire a plumber to do it. And that'd cost a couple $100. Well, for this global spear attachment that fits the John Deere, I'm going to have to fix it too. And they're going to send me the parts for free. And it's not just me. So my advice to you, class, is call up the manufacturer, be polite, but don't give in. You want it free. Free to you. No shipping cost, nothing. You want the replacement parts free. That's my advice. Rick, any comments before we take our phone call?
No, I don't think so. That's sound advice. All right. Just be always corresponding unless they require you to be adversarial. Never try to do that right out of the gate. Always try to be trying to work with somebody.
Yeah, and I said to this,
they make design works, things that are designed. I remember when Jaguar forgot to put a Zerk in to lubricate a certain area that had to be lubricated in the rear back of the car. And so what they did is they designed a bad gasket so it leaked the oil and gave the lubrication that way. And that was what Jaguar did to fix the problem.
Yeah, I was on the phone. I was on the phone with a guy who was selling a Jaguar for $750, and it was a relatively new one. And the reason he was selling it is because the throttle cable broke. The throttle cable between the accelerator pedal inside the vehicle and the throttle body needed a cable, and he couldn't get one. So he was willing to sell a car for peanuts because he couldn't get this cable. So these defects are everywhere, everywhere. Mark in Illinois, welcome. You're on with Dr. Richard Allen Miller.
Hey, good morning. I got a question for Dr. Richard Allen Miller. There's this number that keeps popping up, and I see it's like it goes past algebra and geometry, trigonometry, calculus, prime numbers. It's like this number is 144,000, and it's called the.
That's from the Bible. Yeah,
okay.
144,000.
Hold that thought. We're going into a break. Mark, we'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Mark in Illinois, 144K. Mark?
I think he wanted me to give my response. Is that correct?
Consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that would be Book of Revelations. And there's 2 chapters where chapter 7 and 14, where the 144,000 is mentioned. And Jehovah's Witnesses take that passage more literally than the Church of Rome. And so in Seventh-day Adventists believe that only 144,000 individuals will make heaven. Now, rather than physically from the tribes of Israel, which is different. And so there's been that question. Greg Bear, a very exceptional writer in science fiction, wrote 2 books called Aeon and Epoch. And in Epoch, aliens arrive. It's a science fiction story, a metaphor, where aliens arrive and they select 144,000 people to witness the end of our mother, Earth, from space. And then these 144,000 will be spread throughout the universe in memory of the loss of Earth as the mother. That was his interpretation from a science fiction point of view, where the aliens select the 144,000. The place to find more information is in the Sefer Yetzirah, or Book of Formation, which relates numbers to words. And 144,000 is one of the listings in that, because this is where the concept of numbers first came in as geometry. It's a book of science, in my opinion, book of Sefer Yetzirah. And it had to do with sound and its relationship to words and how to correctly pronounce the name of God, Yahweh or Yad-He Vah-He. And there's interesting things on that. I don't know quite where over, but the 144,000 is originally from the book of Revelation. Second question. Go ahead, forward. Where would you like to go with that?
We just lost Mark.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
it has to do with watchtowers. John Dee wrote about it as well, in the 14th century with his action with spirits. That was in French, and he talks about the four watchtowers that both Jimi Hendrix and Bob Dylan sang about. And the watchtowers are a geometry of angels. It's the angels' names in a geometry thing. I have them posted in my entrance. When you walk into my home, I have the four watchtowers right there in the cubicle that you enter in before you either go upstairs or downstairs. And it's like an entrance or gate into my home. A metaphor.
Rick, there's a technology that is now becoming more widespread in use. And what's happening is digital editing has become more widespread, especially on your coast, the West Coast. So what happens is when a property is listed for sale, we're talking about a home and land, home and yard, the photos that are used in the advertisements, when you search on the internet for that location and you find that property, it may be enhanced. And what I'm saying is that digital technology allows for the photo editing. So as simple as this, a brown lawn may be colored green, lush green. If there are power poles in front of the property, well, we can just take them out digitally. If there are cars and traffic and there's a busy location and you'd like it to be not so busy, well, let's take the cars out and the traffic. And if the home has furnishings inside that just aren't real attractive, while the person that owns it is still living there, well, let's digitally remove them and then replace it with nice, new, clean furniture. And if the walls are kind of shabby, well, we'll virtually paint them. And if there are walls in the way of these, the use of wide open space, geez, it'd really be nice if these walls weren't here, because then we'd have this open look. Let's just take these walls out digitally. What I'm saying, Rick, is we are lying, and it's becoming more widespread in every imaginable way. We are lying with advertisements. So when the person, drives across the country to see this home on the West Coast, they go, well, hold it. There's a wall here. In the picture, that wall's not here.
That's usually
and what about the lawn?
Why you call your Chamber of Commerce in that local area to get the story on the credibility or error coefficient on the individual that you're dialoguing with. And then they have ratings, 1 through 5.
Isn't it awful?
In terms of being credible.
Isn't it awful that we have to do this? We have to actually check to see
it's a sign of the times. It has to do with Pinocchio. How big is his nose? I'm just kidding.
It's awful, absolutely awful that these kinds of things are happening. Okay, so physics. When I went to school, I learned that there was a quote from Albert Einstein that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Is that still in vogue?
Yes and no. It has to do with entropy in terms of access to the energy. The energy is there, but it's either potential or kinetic. It means that it's either accessible in an action or it's a potential, like the mountain is about to fall on Buddha.
Okay, when you say entropy, the way I learned about entropy was the way of thinking about it is order goes random. So, for example, what would that be? So you leave your dog at home, you go to work, and he's inside, and then you really wanted to come back that night from work, but something happened, and you don't get back for a couple days. And what you see is the effect of entropy when you walk in the house. The toilet paper is strewn across the room. You know, the things that were on the counter are on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
The stuffing is now out of the sofa.
That's the place where man has a choice of determining whether or not something beyond, nature itself is organizing the universe or not. And it's a way of looking at things on whether or not you choose to believe there's a God or there's not a God. And it's a personal choice. You have that choice. My parents were atheists. They didn't believe that there was anything after death. And yet they sent me to Missouri City Catechism simply to armor me and protect me from all the people around me that believed differently. And what happened for me is that as I started to look at the universe around me, I felt there was something else going on, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And so I called that place I went faith, an assumed truth. I believed that there was something out there that was not me, that was organizing the universe out of chaos into order. Now, one way to look at that is to say everything that you eat becomes you. Isn't that amazing that you're able to assimilate what you will call food and ideas and water and breath, air, all these different things, and they become you. That's one way of looking at the universe. It's not the only way. It is one way. And these are what we call assumed truths. You can't prove them. Like the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Is that true or not true? Well, today in physics, we have observed that there are precursor waves, event horizons, and that probably space and time are curved. That means they're not linear. If that's true, you can prove with mathematics that the Earth's flat. Is it flat or round? And the correct answer is yes. Because if you choose to see the Earth as flat, there are only certain probable doors that are open to you that your universe can allow. If it's round, it changes those doors. It doesn't necessarily make them better or worse. They're different. And so you have a choice of choosing your assumed truths, and then from there you go to start to define things. And definitions also set up the limitations or exceptions to the rule. And so it's physics, science, does not have the answers any more than religion does. In fact, they're like opposite ends of the same bowl. That's why you have two brains, and you are mostly Malcolm in the middle.
When I was in elementary school, I learned that the Earth is a sphere. I learned that the blue team was supposed to protect and serve us, and I learned that government is here to help. Those are things I learned. But then I'm not so sure about the second and third items I just mentioned. Actually, I'm sure that that's not true. But there are people who believe that the Earth is flat. And they're literally saying that, well, just think of it like this. We live under a dome, and the Earth is flat, and there are walls of ice, so you can't get over them on the edges, and that's what it is. It's finite. Let's talk a little bit more about that when we come back. So, Rick, there are people who are a member of a society called the Flat Earth Society, and they believe that the Earth is flat, not a sphere, because while they walk around on the planet's surface, it looks and feels flat, so they deem that all the evidence, they have all the evidence that they need that the Earth is flat. And not only that, when it comes to gravity, they feel that the Earth's gravity is an illusion. They say that objects do not accelerate downward at 32 feet per second until terminal velocity, but they say that the Earth accelerates upward at 32 feet per second. So what's happening is the Earth is moving up, and the Earth meaning this flat Earth, and it's driven by a mysterious force called dark energy. What are your thoughts about all that?
Well, flatliners. I don't know. With that universe model, there are limitations on, what their sciences can account for, like boiling water. Mm-hmm. And when you drop two items, one weighing twice the weight of the other one, and yet they fall at the same rate. How's that work?
Right.
Well,
except for friction.
Yeah. So, I feel that I know I don't know. I know that when I look at a fence, and the good Reverend Jackson says, is that fence white or black? Probably the correct answer is yes, because while I can see the white fence, I cannot at the same moment see the other side of the fence, both sides now, and that means that I'm making an assumption, and that all assumptions are arbitrary, and you can't prove them. Now, science, that's because of assumed truths. Before you even start with laws or postulates or theorems or axioms or any of that, you start with an assumed truth. And then you go to a definition of what a line shortest distance really means. Once you assume that going from point A to point B is a straight line, that may not be true anymore. We have in solid-state physics what's called event horizons, or precursor waves, that tell you of an event that is about to happen in the crystal before it happens. That eventually became called tunneling, and is a concept in quantum mechanics where what you're doing is assuming that the universe has some particle that is ultimately the smallest particle in the universe that there is, and there isn't anything else, and the whole universe is built up in combinations of these so-called elementary particles. And it's going from an analog system into digital, where what happens next in a quantum universe, quantum meaning digitized, is that you lose information. That was Heisenberg, where the more you know about one thing, the less you know about something else. That is the limitation of looking at the universe as quantum. Now, if you choose to not make your measurements in space or time, but in information and resolution of information, and an example would be the physical plane and then the emotional plane of how you feel about the physical plane. It's the physical plane, but with more information. That's called holographic.
Rick, is quantum energy, dark energy, are they synonyms?
No. Dark energy is an unknown, and we'll talk about that on the other side.
Okay. Dr. Richard Allen Miller is with us. If you'd like to visit his website, richardallenmiller.com, richardallan Miller.com. We're going to talk about dark energy on the other side. And what happens to the energy of the sperm and the egg? How does it get more and more and more? And then what happens when a person dies? Where does that energy go? We'll be back after. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. We're going to be talking about dark energy, but first, Robert in Canada. Robert, welcome.
Hey, Vince.
Robert?
My button has been pushed. Can you hear me?
I can hear you 5 by 5.
Okay, sounds good. You guys were talking about flat Earth and the Flat Earth Society and things like that. I find that very interesting. Have you thought about the idea of controlled opposition in terms of the Flat Earth Society? So the same people who teach us in the classroom that the Earth is a sphere are the same people who would run a Flat Earth Society where they say ridiculous things like the Earth is moving upward and things like that to account for something when really, when you talk about gravity and that idea, it really is just density versus non-dense or buoyancy in the water. That's really what it is. That's why a butterfly can flap its wings and take off. If gravity was real, think about how much it would be to hold down the entire ocean mass. Could a butterfly get up and just fly away, or could we even walk around if gravity was the situation? What it really is just density. That's what things are driven by. So I want Dr. Miller, he said, like, objectively, you can think this way or that way. I don't think that's true. I mean, whatever is. If we're on a spinning ball, that's one thing. But as far as my observations and my research, I don't find that. And I legitimately tried to prove that this flat earth stuff was nonsense. But when you go out and look for yourself, using NASA's numbers, if you understand mathematics, I mean, you know, it's just go get some optics and look for yourself. And you know, I'm trying to be not like objective truth or subjective truth, whatever I'm trying to say there. I'm trying to actually find the answer. And man, I tell you, when you look for yourself, it'll start changing things.
Well, here's the deal, and you're right. Here's the deal. If you make an assumption that imagination is reality, then everything is true. And what I'm trying to say is that when you look at a fence, you can't see the other side of the fence, so you're not truly, absolutely positive that it's the same color of what you can see. You make an assumption. I'm using that as a metaphor. Now, I remember an old graffiti that said there's no such thing as gravity. The earth sucks. You know, it's a metaphor. It's a way of snickering and laughing and realizing that the model that you have to try to understand the laws of physics and the idea of the theory of everything, is an illusion, that it is arbitrary. and that the laws in physics do not last longer than 20 years, ever in history, and that it's only limited by your imagination of perception. And the perception is not seeing something, but filtering it. And when you filter something, you are eliminating some of the possibilities in your desire to be able to predict with reproducibility and repeatability. That was what science demanded was, and those are the laws of so-called laws, are when you have consistency. But we are today, and the way we would measure something, just an ounce, a weight, an ounce, a troy ounce or an English ounce. You know, we have different ounces based on the way we might want to reproduce or repeat something. Now, we started, and this will segue in, dark energy. What is dark energy? It is a name that was given, and this is another example like gravity. It is a name given to a force that is believed to make our universe larger. Distant galaxies appear to be moving away from each other at high speed. How does that work? Is it expanding? The idea that the universe is getting bigger and has been since the Big Bang. Boom, and everything's expanding outward at an accelerated rate. Measurements are now accurate enough to allow astronomers to tell that these different galaxies seem to be accelerating away from us. Redshift. The universe is expanding at an ever-increasing rate. The faster and faster expansion is not understood by scientists. There are many ideas on what might be causing this rapid expansion. Cosmologists would, study it, don't really have the answer. It is, and this is where it gets interesting, as if came out of third generation imaginal psychology. The idea of memes and the way we chunk from one subsystem to another. You can call that fractals if you want to. There's something then between empty space providing a repulsive force that makes the universe expand. This has been named dark energy. Does it exist? Probably not. And probably dark energy will not be used in 20 years from now. However, my current writings suggest that it's a closed system, our universe, and it's closed individually for each of us, like an hourglass. You have two brains. One is science and one is religion, and then you have some kind of balance between the one and the other. It's a little bit of this and more of that. And each of us is different. And so I've chosen to look at life and death as a thin membrane. It's a very thin membrane that on one side is life and one side is death. And one side has light energy and the other side has dark energy, like a white and black hole. And when you press against the membrane, it causes waves, like a drop of water will cause waves in the pool of water. And the other side, death, is pushing against us, and it causes reverberations into life. And my girlfriend, Julie, recently was in the kitchen, and she heard her dog next to her that has been dead. She heard the rattle of his dog tags that had a very distinct sound to them that she had equated with her dog. Now, did that occur or not occur? And it's like a tree that falls in a forest. If there's nobody to hear the sound, did the sound happen or not happen? And you make an assumption that there's no sound if there's no one to hear it. Or the earth's flat. Or that of course it makes a sound, because when anything falls, it makes a noise. And whether there's things there to hear it or not. And so we try to do experiments where we put sound speakers to hear when we're not present. Now, that's where we start to come up with assumptions again in terms of what we think we're hearing and what is actually happening. And really, I'm left with the expression, I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't believed it. Now, you tell me what's true. And I can tell you it doesn't work like that. We're making an assumption that there will be, at some point in our development, a standard law that's true for God and the gods and aliens and man. And I'm going to suggest that God is that which cannot be known, and anything that's known, like what you think God is mostly like halfway to God and what you are capable of should you reach your full potential. There's a movie out that I found really cool called Glass with, it's a second in the movie. The first one is called Unbreakable. This is the second movie where there are three individuals in an insane asylum thinking they're comic book heroes. And it turns out that is more close to reality and their capabilities of laws, being able to defy the laws of physics because they believe they can. Now, what's true? There is. I don't know. I don't know. I try to approach this.
I think you know a lot, Doctor. You know a lot about a lot.
I know that I don't know. That's a good one. I have theories and I have models trying to describe it so that you can see it in your mind's eye. But that is where the real magic occurs. It's in your mind's eye. Then it has nothing to do with physics or religion. It's yours. And that is for the truth. That's why today I'm saying magic is the art of changing consciousness. Will.
All right, we'll be right back. Robert, would you like to stay with us?
Yeah, I'll stay with you. I got some. I want to ask Dr. Miller some things. Thank you.
Yeah, and my call screen says Robert in Canada. You're Robert in Kansas.
Yeah, I said Kansas. Maybe, I kind of have an accent sometimes, so maybe that's what it was.
Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Robert in Kansas is with us. Robert, just for clarification, are you believing that the Earth is flat, or do you believe that the Earth is a sphere? Or aren't you sure?
I would say to you that ultimately I keep an open mind. Obviously, with the situation, you want to, if you thought one way your entire life because you were educated that way, it's hard to break that understanding. And gravity, to Dr. Miller, let me just say, you don't know me. Well, we have met actually, but you don't know me. I'm from northern Germany. My people, I'm a natural born scientist, and I have been since I was, able to even think. I've been a scientist my whole life. And I appreciate what you mean. You talk about observable, testable, repeatable. I understand, and that's why I'm in such a dilemma, is that I have tried to disprove this ridiculous notion, right? I mean, because you believe a certain way, and then you find that the more scientific research you do, it's just like, whoa, you almost want to stop doing it. So mean by that. And if you did the same, that's what I'm saying. When you say what is truth, you know, it is with your own eyes and what they observe, what you feel. Okay, I don't know how to describe that necessarily, but when you go outside and you're out there, do you feel like you're spinning around on a ball? I mean, you know, things like that. And I know that sounds maybe childish on some level, but it really just goes to you talk about what is truth. Well, that's a great question. Truth is God, you know, but then it goes all the way back to, you talk about the Big Bang, and I guess you would go to evolution eventually, right? And you would be against creation on some level. So it's these fundamental questions. Did God create everything? And you get back to all these principles of space and time and all these things you talk about. That's why it's so fascinating for me, because you understand many of these topics so much better than I do. So I'm learning, and at the same time, I had really smart people in my life who I respect, engineers, and very intelligent considering, what people would think, or whatever, like master's level engineers, and they say, hey, disprove this to me. And I go out and try to do it. I mean, maybe they're playing a joke on me, but, these are serious men who are, are mathematics people, right? And they say, hey, we found, and it's like, okay, I go out and I look at a body of water. It's so long and it should have this much curve, and it doesn't. And you're like, well, what the heck, and then you just keep making these observations, and eventually you become unsure. Like you say, maybe the earth is much bigger than they say. Maybe something else is different. Who am I to say, Vincent? You asked me what it is. Who am I to tell you what it is, right? To tell you personally. That's what I'm saying. And it has to be something. I mean, it's so different from what we're taught. It is an extreme, like Dr. Miller was saying, the consciousness. Do the sun, moon, and stars, do they all revolve around us? If that's the case, well, then that lets you know you're pretty special, or something is, if everything goes around you compared to you being in some random place, spinning around, everything is just random and accident, you come from a monkey, well, that's one way to look at things. But then I look into evolution, like you go into these different areas and you say, what about evolution? Well, I try to look into that, and it's like, man, shouldn't there be like lizard rat things running around everywhere and like, graveyards of monkey people?
Yeah, there's other things that happen too. For example, missing links and missing genomes in our blood types. Where did they come from? They just appear out of nowhere. So evolution and creationism, who knows? It's arbitrary.
You're right, Dr. Miller.
Well, let's talk about the flat Earth for just a minute. So Guineith Isaacs is in Australia, and she talks with us. She talks with me every day, but she talks with us at least once a week on the air. It's summer there. It's freezing cold here. How is it possible that if the Earth were flat, we would be freezing cold and she would be basking in the sun? How is that possible? If the Earth were flat, we'd all get roughly the same amount of sunshine. We'll be right back. We're talking about the flat Earth. And Robert, in Hawaii, in the Big Island, there's a mountain peak. And on a nearby island, about 300 miles away, there's another mountain peak. So these mountains are relatively tall. One is about 13,000 feet up. The other is about 5,000 feet up. And they're separated by a span of 300 miles or so. And you would be able to see one from the other if the Earth were flat. But you can't because of the curvature of the Earth. Because all you can see around you from these Hawaiian Islands is water. That's it. And why is it that if you're standing on the shore of either coast and you see a ship sailing away from you, all of a sudden it disappears when they're about 25 miles out? That would indicate that the Earth is curved, wouldn't it?
Well, that's one way to see it. Not always. That's one way. My guess is there are as many different ways of seeing it as there are individual human beings.
Robert, your thoughts?
Well, Vince, you make good points with those, with what you said. I would just say that, I don't believe those to be true. The points you made in terms of the Hawaii island example. I think in the right conditions that you probably could see those islands. I've seen evidence to that effect, but I can't tell you that you're wrong either. You know, I don't want to argue with you about that. I did want to try and teach a class on the flat earth model and, some of the questions you've already asked, before, just about what we're looking at and how it really would work. You talk about Guineith Isaacs having a certain temperature in Australia, which I want to use that because I can argue on that point really well. You know, she has a certain temperature.
How about the green flash with Johnny Depp and the difference of going from this universe into that universe? The concept of the green flash at the moment of the red having a green flash across the universe in Hawaii. Hoorah. And see, there's things that stop us from understanding because there's conflict. And everything that man does, everything has two sides to it. It is as if man takes what is and polarizes it because of his belief systems and assumed truths. And so nuclear energy for medicine or for war, which is it? Everything has two sides to it, like the fence. And while Joan Collins, I love Joni Mitchell, seeing both sides now, it's not possible. You can imagine what the color on the other side of the fence is, but from your perspective as a human being, not God, you can't see, as a metaphor, you can't see both sides now. You can only see one side and assume that the other side is consistent. And then when you try to prove it, like with dark energy and expanding universe, well, now we have to create particles and dark matter for the dark energy.
You don't think that's just all lies? That's all nonsense?
No, it isn't any more than we evolving, going from one set of laws to the next set.
Well,
going
either we
from
evolved or we were created. It's one or the other. It's not either
well,
or.
no, you could, yes, you could. Well, that is an assumption. There's a possible third one. But we haven't figured that out yet. And that's where the evolution of our thought changes in the mind's eye to be able to comprehend or construct a possible third thing. Creationism, that we were created as we are, or that we evolved like Darwin. We know that neither is actually true.
Well, we're taught Darwin in school, and I'm finding it to all be lies now. And the same thing
well,
with
not lies. There are older ways of looking at things that may not allow you to have access to your God.
Yeah, like purposely hiding God. If you know.
Well, then there it is. And so each of us has an assumed truth, and it changes as we get older. Castaneda, I love Carlos Castaneda. He said there were 4 enemies of men. The first was fear. And I just watched After Earth with Will Smith and his son doing this wonderful sci-fi movie last night. And it showed that once you overcame fear, you became a ghost. because you did not emit pheromone, and the alien couldn't smell you. It was blind. It only smell you, and it was to smell your fear. But if you had no fear, then you achieved personal power, and it was power that corrupted, and absolute power corrupted absolutely. And then, as you evolved more, you started to see things more clearly. I can see clearly now. And that in itself became an enemy because it limited your view. And of course, I get to experience the fourth enemy of man, which is old age. I'm too old to do anything about it, but humor is, well, the only thing that has got me through this thing as a scientist, because I know that I don't know. And if I don't do anything more as a scientist, but give you that gift of suggesting that imagination is reality. It has nothing to do with physics or laws. It has to do with your mind's eye and what you see connecting one dot with another. And guess what? It turns out connecting dots is arbitrary. The universe is yours to play. Have fun.
No, there's objective truth, Doctor. That's not true at all, what you just said. If you don't water the seed, it doesn't grow. If you do things wrong, they don't work. It's God's order, God's rules, okay? If you go out in the winter and you're not protected, you're going to die. It's not about my imagination. It's about what is. And that's what I'm getting at. There's observation.
There's real danger out there. That was one of the lessons in the movie, After Earth. It was fear is not real.
Well, it's pretty
There's real danger,
sometimes,
but not fear.
You know.
And whether you walk a fence line, you're balanced on a fence line, and you're 2 feet from the ground, or you're 2,000 feet from the ground. What should matter? The risks higher?
I'm scared of heights, Dr. Miller.
Well, I know, and I'm afraid of women. There it is. No, I'm just kidding. What I'm trying to suggest is that the fear itself is not real because you're not living in the moment. You're living in the future. And really, if you live in the moment is, while there's real danger, fear doesn't exist. It only exists when you're living in the future.
Gentlemen, I'm kind of a practical guy, and I have to see things physically to understand them many times. Not all the time, but many times. And I happen to know that frequency modulation that's used in FM radio, which is frequency modulation radio, is a line of sight technology. So if the antenna cannot be seen by the receiver, reception is almost impossible to make happen. FM radio towers are typically 300 plus feet in the air in most locations, easily 300 feet. Some antennas are up to 1,800 feet in the air. So my question for those who believe in flat Earth is, why would we put an antenna really high in the air if the Earth were flat? Why would we do that? Because if the Earth were flat, we'd be able to see pretty far. But we can't. So it's pretty easy for me to understand that the Earth is a sphere. It's pretty easy for me to understand that the planets are spheres. And the way I understand this, and this may not be true, but it seems logical to me, that if you start out with an irregular piece of rock and it's hurling through space, just its traveling is going to round off the edges. And as it tumbles, it's going to become more and more the shape of a sphere, just because of friction. Just as if you look in a creek, and we have plenty of creeks here in Missouri, and there are creek rocks, and they're rounded. If they've been in the creek tumbling over one another for years and years and years, and I don't know how many years this is, thousands maybe, they become more and more rounded. As time progresses, the rocks become rounder and rounder and rounder until they approach the shape of a sphere. Robert, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, Vince, I see what you're saying, and you have good points. I'm trying to catch up with all the questions being asked. I don't really get a chance to answer them, but
and another thing.
I think the Earth is flat, guys. I really do.
That's why we're
really
going to all get together someday in a big thing in Missouri. How's that sound?
Well, there's 14 of us now. Hey, Robert, thanks so much. I've got a couple things I need to go over with Rick, but thank you so much for calling in.
Google the UN map. Okay.
Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Rick, you know Mrs. Finelli, and she's reading this book. She's a voracious reader, and it's by James Rollins. It's called The Eye of God. And in this book, there's some quotes, and let me just read them because there's a question at the end of this. Dark energy is the stuff of time and space. Goes on to say, dark energy is the driving force behind quantum mechanics. They are one in the same, a universal constant. Goes on to say, a common consensus among the neuroscientists is that human consciousness lies within the quantum field generated by the vast neural network that is our brain. So consciousness is a quantum effect. Goes on to say, if that's true, then by virtue of quantum mechanics, our consciousness is entangled across all the various multiverses. Perhaps when we die, it is just a collapse of that potential in this timeline, and our consciousness shifts into another one where we are still living. And that sounds like heaven, doesn't it?
Okay. Now, this guy is, remember, he's a science fiction writer like the 144,000 and Greg Bear, where he is taking a archetype or modern myth within men of belief systems, and it changed because they didn't have quantum mechanics back in the 1800s. Okay? And this guy writes really good stories. He wrote Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls, and a bunch of things. And the book she's reading, by the way, is number 7. I don't know which one it is. It's in a series that he wrote called the Sigma Force series, with book 0, book 1, book 2, so on. The Last Oracle, the Doomsday Key, the Skeleton Key, the Eye of God is book number 9. And it was written in 2013. I looked him up because I have read some of his stuff, and so I didn't know quite how to respond to her at the moment she talked to me without a little bit of context. This guy has taken a lot of things like Antarctica and woven stories around the mythology of Nephilim and other kinds of things that might be going on. His Indiana Jones book and the Crystal Skulls are very interesting because crystal skulls, which we've found in Peru and other places, have unusual physics behind them, kind of like in India in the Upanishads with the Vimana, which is a space vehicle, or written in the Bible, the throne chariot of God, Ezekiel's vision. The idea of taking something and making a story around it that has enough metaphor, you believe it. And here's what I'm doing in that sense. Last week I met somebody that has developed a certain kind of porous concrete using magnesium. And what we're going to do is make a geodesic dome, printing it with cement using a 3D printer. Because once we do that, then my screenplay that I've written for Netflix, The Domes of Mars, will be easily assimilated by the public. Because once the public can see how it would work in their mind's eye, like a replicator on Star Trek, now becoming a 3D printer in reality, now we can begin to teach our children the idea of hydroponics and how you would live on Mars using manure as your binding agent with hemp, and you grow your domes.
Rick, we've got Rosie in Missouri. Rosie, we're very short on time.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment on mind over matter. My husband got sick about 3 weeks ago. I talked to him at lunchtime, and he said, oh, so-and-so went home sick. Now I'm going to be sick. And it's always like this. He gets sick thinking about it, and I got this positive attitude where I never get sick. I get sick once every 10 years. He had the flu for a week, and I never got sick. So what is your thoughts on mind over matter?
Paul, it has to do with placebo, and they used to say that 10% of all healing was in the mind's eye of what you believed was going on. Today, with microdosing of psychedelic mushrooms and healing yourself on a spiritual level where it proliferates down into the physical, has now taken placebo to 100%.
We're out of time. We're out of time. Thanks so much, Rosie. Thank you, Rick.